all good things must come to an end. And unfortunately, that includes the Japanese 1980s. Fittingly, 1989 arrives carrying some very heavy themes. This was the year the decade truly peaked, where Japan said goodbye to some of the most legendary figures in its long history, where the country once again flexed its creative and cultural influence, and where Japan had fully regained its confidence as a nation that could not only eat its own lunch, but probably yours too. Oh, and money. There's a lot of money to talk about this year. Speaking of which, love me or hate me for it, I also love money. And if you love ad-free content, then I might just have a pretty good deal for you. Consider stopping by my Patreon page for ad-free entertainment, starting at just $1 per month. No pressure though, a like and a subscribe work just fine too, because honestly, I'm just happy that you're here. Now, that being said, allow me to do the honors, to kick off one final year of the Japanese 1980s. IKIMASHŌ! Let's do this! The final year of the decade began in nationwide mourning. At 6:33 AM on January 7th, 1989, Emperor Showa, otherwise known to the world as Hirohito, passed away at the age of 87. Hirohito's reign as emperor was the longest in Japanese history. He ascended the throne on December 25th, 1926, and remained emperor until his death more than 62 years later. A span of time so long and so eventful that it is almost impossible to summarize cleanly. His reign encompassed the rise of Japanese militarism, the invasion of Manchuria, the Second Sino-Japanese War, World War II, and the total devastation of the nation, followed by its extraordinary post-war recovery and transformation into an economic superpower. Because of his role in these wars and the decisions that had led to them, Hirohito remained a deeply controversial figure internationally and a subject of intense historical debate that continues to this day. But within Japan itself, for several generations of people who lived through both prosperity and hardship in the land of the rising sun, Emperor Showa was first and foremost something else entirely, a divine figure and a living symbol of the nation. And that is why his death came as such an immeasurable shock. Hirohito had been diagnosed with intestinal cancer as early as September of 1987, a fact kept secret not only from the Japanese public, but even from the man himself. His passing was announced to the nation at 7:55 that same morning. Then, just over 6 weeks later, on February 24th, a state funeral was held. Not only as a final farewell, but also as a carefully designed display of the peaceful, changed Japan that had emerged over the course of his reign. The funeral procession lasted 40 minutes and stretched for nearly 2 miles, passing landmarks such as the National Diet and the National Stadium before ending at Shinjuku-gyoen Park. Hundreds of thousands lined the streets, over 30,000 police officers were deployed, and tens of millions watched from home. The death of Emperor Showa represented many things at once. The passing of a divine figure in the eyes of the Japanese people, and the death of a controversial imperial leader in the eyes of the world. But no matter one's perspective, it also marked something undeniable. The end of the Showa era itself, an era defined by extreme lows and extraordinary highs. And at midnight the following day, Japan officially exited the Showa era and entered the Heisei era, just as the nation stood on the brink of its most dazzling peak. As for the first major music release of the Heisei era, well, that one also came from Japanese royalty. Japanese music royalty. On January 11th, Misora Hibari, the legendary singer also known as the Queen of Showa, released her final single, Kawa no Nagare no Yoni, or Like the Flow of the River. And honestly, what a way to close out an iconic career. The song wasn't even meant to be a single at first. Hibari's staff, they favored a different track called Ha Ha Ha, and Misora usually trusted their judgment. But this time, she insisted. This was the song she wanted to release. She was absolutely right. Kawa no Nagare no Yoni peaked at number 8 on the Oricon charts shortly after release. Respectable, but not explosive. It was only months later, after Misora Hibari passed away at the young age of 52, that the song truly revealed its power. Sales surged, and its lyrics, reflective, gentle, and deeply emotional, they took on an entirely new meaning. The song had been written by a certain Akimoto Yasushi, who was inspired by the sight of the East River in New York and feeling homesick for his home country of Japan. Hence that entire river theme. Misora, on the other hand, she saw the imagery of a flowing river as somewhat of a mirror of her own life. She really liked that song, and as fate would have it, her final release, and the one that she personally insisted on, also became one of her greatest. Following her untimely death, the single continued to sell and sell, eventually becoming a million seller. By 2019, it had sold over 2 million copies, making it Misora Hibari's best-selling song of all time, and one of the most iconic pieces of music in Japanese history. In what was an unbearably emotional moment, it was played at her funeral, and in 1997, it defeated more than 19,000 other songs to take first place in an NHK poll for the songs that moved the people of Japan in the 20th century, receiving over 437,000 votes out of nearly 18 million. In many ways, Kawa no Nagare no Yoni is the safest possible choice when people ask what the greatest Japanese song of all time might be. But all the accolades and the numbers, they ultimately point to something much simpler. Just like the Emperor's passing days earlier, this song marked the end of an era. The closing chapter of a legendary career, of a woman who gave Japan hope through music when it needed it most, and who remained relevant even as the industry changed completely around her. Iconic, legendary, indescribably influential. Rest in peace, Misora Hibari. And to complete a sad trilogy of monumental passings, I promise this is the last one, February 9th marked the death of Tezuka Osamu. Often referred to as the god of manga, Tezuka was quite simply the Misora Hibari of Japanese comics. His influence was not just significant, it was foundational. Ever heard of Astro Boy? Yep, that was Tezuka's work. Known in Japan as Tetsuwan Atomu, the manga was published between 1952 and 1968 across 23 different volumes, and it became one of the most influential manga series ever created, selling over 100 million copies worldwide. Thus, it remains one of the best-selling manga series of all time. But hey, Astro Boy's influence didn't stop on printed paper. Its anime adaptation is now widely regarded as the birth of modern Japanese anime itself. At the height of its popularity, nearly 40% of all Japanese households with a television tuned in to watch the adventures of the small android boy. And across 4 seasons and nearly 200 episodes, Astro Boy established the visual language, the storytelling rhythms, and much more of what would later go on to define anime for decades to come. Tezuka, he was deeply involved in its production. But to limit Tezuka Osamu to Astro Boy alone would be doing him a disservice. Kimba the White Lion, Princess Knight, Blackjack, the ambitious and tragically unfinished Phoenix. Tezuka Osamu was a creative force on a scale few artists ever reach, influencing not only manga, but also animation, film, and storytelling itself. Another giant lost in 1989, and it's hard not to wonder what the anime landscape would look like today without his contributions. And who knows where much of that bubble-era money might have ended up had Japan never introduced a consumption tax. What's that? That is exactly what happened on April 1st, 1989? Must be an April Fool's joke. Well, no it wasn't. Japan was honestly a bit late to the consumption tax game. Many other countries had introduced similar systems years, even decades earlier. Attempts to bring this exciting little text to Rising Sun Land had been made as far back as 1979, but resistance within the ruling Liberal Democratic Party caused the idea to be shelved entirely for the time being. Fast forward an entire decade. It wasn't until recently disgraced Prime Minister Takeshita Noboru that the thing was finally pushed through. Just months before his own resignation, his parting gift to the nation arrived. A brand new 3% consumption tax. I mean, in theory, it wasn't outrageous. The rate was low, and Japan was wealthy. But in practice, public reaction was, let's say, less enthusiastic. Whether it was fear of change, resentment toward the government as a whole, or simply the principle of the thing, many Japanese were unhappy. Of course, in hindsight, this was only the beginning. The tax rose to 5% in 1997, and today sits at 10%. Not insignificant, sure, but hey, compared to some other countries, it could be worse, dear Japan.
Commercial time です。
Chichin, pui pui. Daichou pui. Arinamin V ドリンク、武田。見てくだされ。
どっちにしろさしたる問題はないな。見たまえ。長女かすみ19歳、次女なびき17歳、三女あかね16歳。君の言い名付けだよ。好きなのを選んでくれ。
On April the 20th, 1989, Japan's prestigious Asahi Shimbun newspaper found itself in a bit of a journalistic pickle. All because of a seemingly harmless little article about a coral reef in Okinawa. Published in the evening edition as part of the paper's Photo 89 series, the article focused on a large coral formation in Okinawa's Yaeyama Islands that had allegedly been defaced by carved markings spelling out the letters KY. Accompanying the piece was this photograph taken by Asahi photographer Honda Yoshiro, clearly showing those letters etched into the coral. On the surface, the article accompanying the photo felt thoughtful and sincere, and framed the damage as a symptom of over-tourism and a growing number of divers in the area, while also using the image as a broader metaphor for 1980s Japanese society. A society supposedly willing to destroy something nature had taken centuries to create. All in all, solid journalism, at least at first glance. The real problem only emerged once people familiar with the reef saw the article. Members of the local diving community immediately sensed that something was wrong. They knew the coral intimately. Those markings, well, they hadn't been there before. Their suspicion was simple and damning. The damage must have been staged by the Asahi Shimbun. The newspaper initially denied the accusations, as did the photographer himself, but after weeks of internal investigation and questioning, the truth finally came to light. Honda Yoshiro, the man responsible for the photo, admitted that he had carved the markings himself, fabricating the damage entirely just to create a stronger image and a more compelling story. As for why he chose to do it, Honda later claimed that the Photo 89 series suffered from a poor reputation within the company, and that he simply wanted to produce a photo that would stand out. Unfortunately, it worked, just not in the way Asahi had hoped. The shitstorm was severe, Honda was dismissed, multiple editors were disciplined, and Asahi Shimbun's reputation as a trustworthy newspaper took a serious hit nationwide. But hey, the author of the article certainly got one thing spot on. Some Japanese of the 1980s really had no qualms about destroying a centuries-old piece of natural beauty. The very next day, on April 21st, Nintendo decided to just casually drop one of the most influential pieces of consumer electronics ever. For the second time this decade. Because this was the day the Game Boy made its worldwide debut in Japan. Designed by Nintendo legend Yokoi Gunpei, the mastermind behind the D-pad, the Game & Watch, and even Metroid, the Game Boy had a simple but revolutionary goal. Take video games out of the living room and bring them everywhere. On the train, in the park, at work, at your in-laws' place, anywhere boredom dared show its face, basically. They absolutely nailed it. A dot matrix screen, a single speaker, 4 face buttons and a D-pad, most importantly, interchangeable cartridges that slid neatly into the back of its adorably chunky, yet for the time impressively portable frame. All of that could be yours at launch for 12,500 yen, or just under $100 in today's money. Games cost around 2,600 yen, and at launch you had 4 options to choose from. Super Mario Land, Alleyway, Baseball, and Yakuman. Yep, no Tetris included for the Japanese launch, but that hardly mattered. By August, the Game Boy had already sold over 700,000 units in Japan alone, and when the system launched in the United States shortly after, worldwide sales blew past the 1 million mark in just weeks. What followed was one of the most absurdly successful runs in gaming history. Nearly 120 million units sold worldwide across all models and redesigns, 67 games that sold over 1 million copies each, and the birth of countless legendary franchises and entries. The Game Boy became a full-blown pop culture icon, a juggernaut that stayed on store shelves all the way until 2003. With the Game Boy, Nintendo proved something. Portable gaming could be just as fun and just as high quality as its living room counterpart, and often even more profitable. Today, portable gaming is a permanent pillar of the industry, especially in Japan, where it continues to dominate. And while the Game Boy wasn't technically the first handheld, it was the first handheld, if you catch my drift. Another cultural icon, another money-printing machine. The 1980s were really good to Nintendo. And right alongside the best-selling game system of the year, Japan also got its biggest song of 1989, Diamonds by Princess. The band had just come off providing the opening theme for the Fuji TV Monday night drama Kimi ga Uso Tsuita, a moderately successful show that gave them their first real boost in visibility. But Diamonds, the first of 5 consecutive #1 singles, was the song that truly launched them into the J-pop stratosphere. A massive pop hit that sounds exactly like you would expect for the era, glossy, upbeat, and possibly catchy. And it was also completely unavoidable for the rest of 1989 if you lived in Japan. 1.2 million copies sold, triple platinum certified, and an earworm of truly divine proportions. The final biggest song of the year, of the decade, and a perfect send-off for Japanese 80s pop. Honestly, one hell of a run. SOS. 3 simple letters, discovered on July 24th, 1989. High up on Mount Asahi in Hokkaido, spelled out using 19 wooden locks? This bizarre sign was spotted from a helicopter during what was supposed to be a fairly routine search and rescue operation. Police were looking for 2 male climbers from Tokyo who had gone missing in the surrounding mountains that day. The 2 men were eventually found and rescued safely several kilometers away from the sign, so case closed? Not really. Naturally, investigators initially assumed that the massive SOS message had been constructed by the missing climbers. But when questioned, both men denied any knowledge of it. They hadn't built it, they hadn't seen it. They didn't even know it existed. The following day, police began investigating the area around the sign itself. That's when the situation took a far darker turn. Nearby, they discovered human bone fragments showing animal bite marks, believed to belong to an adult male. Scattered around the area were personal belongings, including a driver's license issued to a certain Iwamura Kenji, a 25-year-old office worker from Aichi Prefecture who had gone missing all the way back in July of 1984. Pretty unsettling were also the 4 cassette tapes found near the site. Most contained anime theme songs from television series airing between 1982 and 1984. But one tape also included a 2-minute and 17-second recording of a young man screaming for help, claiming he was trapped on a cliff. Further investigation then revealed something even stranger. Aerial photographs confirmed that the massive SOS sign had already been visible as early as September of 1987, meaning it had been sitting on that mountain for years. Now, at first glance, the pieces do seem to fit. Iwamura had gone missing, he was known to carry around cassette tapes with anime theme songs on them, and the timeline also lined up. But the deeper investigators looked, the more questions emerged. Iwamura's parents, they couldn't say with certainty that the voice on the tape belonged to their son. No tools were ever found that could explain how the logs had been cut or moved, and a medical examination suggested that the remains belonged to someone who had been severely weakened, yet constructing the SOS sign would likely have taken nearly 2 full days of physical labor. So, who built it? Was Iwamura Kenji truly the victim? Were others involved? Or were there additional victims who were never found? To this day, the SOS incident remains only partially explained, a haunting mystery that has lingered in Japan since the summer of 1989.
コマーシャルタイムです。
もしもし、お宅の電話、顔見て話せます？
テレパシー。
このテレパシーを電話に取り付けるだけでテレビ電話になっちゃうんですよ。静止画像だからいい顔を選んでおくれます。もしもし。
わあ、ユージさんがお部屋に来ちゃった。
君もテレパシーしてみる？
テレするとパ？テレパシー。
テレビ電話は三菱。
August 21st marked the start of production for what would become the last truly iconic Japanese car of the decade. Enter the R32 Nissan Skyline GTR. Technically, this was already the 3rd Skyline GTR, but in reality, this is where the legend truly begins. All-wheel drive, an RB26DETT inline-6 engine, 280 horsepower, all wrapped in a design that somehow managed to look cool and aggressively serious at the same time. And the craziest part, the car turned out to be even better than the specs suggested. When Japanese car magazine and TV show Best Motoring took the R32 to the Nürburgring in Germany later that same year, it became the fastest production car to lap the track at the time, clocking an astonishing 8 minutes and 22 seconds. A clear sign of what Nissan had built this thing for, because the R32 was designed with 2 goals in mind: racing and winning. And win it did. A stripped-down race version entered the Japanese Touring Car Championship and proceeded to win every single race it ever started. 29 victories across 4 seasons. Overseas, same story. New Zealand, Australia, total domination. And after terrifying competitors abroad, the car earned itself a nickname that would stick forever: Godzilla. Unlike its namesake, this Godzilla was actually welcomed with open arms by the people back home. Despite a steep starting price of 4.5 million yen in 1989, Nissan sold nearly 44,000 units over the car's 5-year production run, almost exclusively within Japan. The R32 GTR was fast, brutal, and wildly ahead of its time. A mass-produced car that could demolish racetracks without being completely out of reach, at least for the Japanese upper middle class and above. There's plenty of Skyline history before and after the R32, but if you're looking for the true beginning of the GTR's modern legacy, Godzilla starts here. A different kind of Godzilla then stomped straight into the American entertainment industry on September 28th. But this one was made of yen and dollar bills. That day, Japanese electronics giant Sony officially acquired Columbia Pictures, one of Hollywood's biggest studios, for a cool $3.4 billion, or roughly $8.8 billion in today's money. At the time, it was the largest Japanese acquisition of an American company ever. And as if that weren't bold enough, the deal came right on the heels of Sony's purchase of CBS Records the year before. If anyone still doubted Sony's ambition to conquer the US entertainment industry, this erased all doubt. So what did Sony get for its billions? Well, a lot. Columbia's library included massive 80s franchises like Ghostbusters and The Karate Kid, along with decades worth of film and television properties stretching back to the early 20th century. Overnight, Sony had a serious foothold in Hollywood, and reactions were mixed. Japanese companies were buying American icons left and right at the time, and not everyone was thrilled. And at first, the critics seemed right. Columbia Pictures, renamed Sony Pictures Entertainment in 1991, struggled badly, forcing Sony to take a $2.7 billion write-off in 1994. It looked like a complete disaster. But somewhat surprisingly, Sony didn't just walk away. As of 2026, they're still in the movie business, and while the acquisition remains debatable, franchises under Sony's umbrella like Men in Black, Spider-Man, and James Bond have since proven massively successful. Back in 1989 though, the Columbia deal was one thing above all else: a flex. And funny enough, it wouldn't be the last big Japanese flex in the US that year. Stay tuned. But in the meantime, on that very same day in fact, another Japanese television institution bowed out when The Best 10 aired its final episode.
さてお待たせいたしましたザ・ベスト10豪華版これ
Broadcast weekly on JNN since 1978, The Best 10 carved out a massive audience in what was an already incredibly competitive 1980s music TV landscape. The concept of the show was pretty simple: count down the top 10 songs of the week and have the artists perform them live. But what set the show apart was how rankings were determined. Frankly, sales alone didn't cut it. Points were also awarded based on radio requests, cable broadcasts, and most importantly, postcard requests mailed directly to the show by viewers. That system allowed unexpected songs and artists to break through alongside the usual superstars, turning The Best 10 into a genuine discovery platform for fans of Japanese music. Add in short interviews, live performances, and real audience engagement, and you had something special here. The numbers reflected that. At its peak, the show reached nearly 42% household viewership in the Kanto region, making it one of the biggest music programs in Japanese TV history. Ratings started to decline by the mid-80s though, and in July of 1989, the decision was made to end it. The final broadcast on September 28th wasn't just the end of a TV show, it was the farewell of a true 80s pop culture icon and a launchpad that helped shape countless legendary careers. The Best 10, you were really the best. October 1989. Berserk. Need I say more? But just in case, imagine a dark fantasy manga set in a brutal medieval European world, starring a man literally named Guts, featuring some of the finest artwork and writing the medium has ever seen. That is Berserk. The series began publication in the October '89 issue of a little magazine called Gekkan Animal House, a magazine that would later become Young Animal. And astonishingly, Berserk is still running today, surviving both a magazine rebrand and even the death of its creator. Miura Kentaro was just 23 years old when Berserk officially launched, though he'd been developing the concept since he was only 18. Basically, this wasn't just a project, it was quite literally the man's life work. Over 32 years, despite frequent hiatuses, Miura produced 364 chapters before his untimely death in 2021. The result, a series that's somehow both niche and wildly successful at the same time. It's no Dragon Ball or One Piece, but 70 million copies sold for something this dark, brutal, and uncompromising? Extraordinary. Now continued by Mori Koji, Miura's childhood friend and fellow mangaka, Berserk has also spawned one excellent anime adaptation, one less excellent one, countless awards, and an immeasurable influence on manga, anime, and video games. And yes, I am willing to die on the following hill. That whole ridiculously humongous greatsword on a character that should physically be completely unable to wield it and yet does so anyway trope. Yep, Berserk started that. There, I said it. Then, just over a month after Sony's Hollywood flex, Japan doubled down. On October 31st, Mitsubishi Estate bought Rockefeller Center in New York. Yes, that Mitsubishi, 3 diamonds and all. And if you only know them from cars, here's a fun fact. Mitsubishi Estate is the largest real estate developer in Japan. In a Japan of 1989, which was overflowing with cash, the domestic market apparently just wasn't big enough for them anymore. So Mitsubishi decided to go shopping, and walked away with Rockefeller Center and an 80% stake in a Rockefeller Group for $1.4 billion. A most terrifying Halloween surprise. The purchase gave Japan a massive, front and center presence in the heart of Manhattan. Officially though, it was an investment. Mitsubishi believed rents would triple. But reality had other plans. A US real estate downturn in the early 90s hit hard, and by 2000, the property was sold back to American owners for $1.85 billion, plus a few extras. Mitsubishi's ownership was short-lived, but symbolic. Because honestly, nothing better captures the madness of the late 80s Japanese asset bubble than buying one of America's most iconic landmarks like it was just another office building. When $1 billion felt like pocket change, when Japan felt unstoppable, when times were good.
中国の人そうです。僕中国から来ました。留学生です。うちは高くないっての。いや、高いんじゃなくて、中国の人から見ると高いっていうことだよね。写真に入る？うん、ちょっと上はみ出してる。だいぶね、顔と中国もだいぶ違いますね。中国の顔はね。
And with that, we reached the final event of 1989, and the final big moment of the Japanese 1980s. On December 29th, the last trading day of the decade, the Nikkei stock index reached its all-time peak at 38,915.87 points. The index had gained 9,000 points in 1989 alone, perfectly capturing the sheer insanity of the country's late 80s economy. The asset price bubble that had been inflating since 1986 was fueled by one thing above all: overconfidence. Stock prices and real estate values skyrocketed beyond reason, and Tokyo land prices reached absurd levels, at one point estimated to be 350 times higher than Manhattan's. The land beneath the Imperial Palace was famously said to be worth more than the entire state of California. Completely irrational behavior, until it wasn't. In January of 1990, stock prices began to fall. By September, they had dropped 50%. By August of 1992, the Nikkei had collapsed to around 14,000 points, a staggering 63% decline in just 2.5 years. This was it. The optimistic, extravagant, overconfident 1980s were well and truly over, as Japan entered the somber 1990s, the beginning of what would later be known as the Lost Decades. What a ride. Hey, thank you for joining me on this journey through the most incredible decade in modern Japanese history. Like you probably, I'm a bit sad to see this series come to an end, but you know what they say. One door closes, another one opens. If you want to know more about the future of Timeline Japan and other projects I've been thinking about, make sure to visit my Patreon page, where I will give a bit of an update very soon. let me just say this much. There are plenty more stories to tell in Japan of the 1980s, and there are other amazing decades waiting to be covered as well. Now, with that being said, allow me to once again give my heartfelt thanks to everyone who has already become a member on said Patreon page, including Sachsenfuchs, D Fox, The Hockey Gentleman, Saikajo, Khalid Lepta, Xoyabu, Tricoat, Kevin Hickson, Buns, Michael Smith, RK0, Hajime no James, Utku Hussein Kaya, Steve Matsui, Haipainen, Javier Sodavia, Midnight Channel, CJ and Mary, Turam, Cats and Soup, Chart B-Man, Ben Harradine, White Gilden, Sierra DC, T-Bird, Metal Mama, Boo Cakes, Ian Farmer, Chris Wallace, JR Horse, Journeyman 351, and Adeye Akono. And to all of you who tuned in to witness the Japanese 1980s, thank you so much for watching. I guess I'll see you. じゃあまたね。